our upfront stuff tonight. We do have someone new. So, what we teach here at the Aramaic Bible Institute is based on the work of Dr. George M. Lamsa, who in 1957, and actually probably before that, he introduced the Aramaic language of Jesus to the world. And so this work, this Aramaic, okay, is very, very unique, and is the original Aramaic that text that were discovered in the Kurdistan Mountains. Okay, Dr. Lamsa was a native of a town called Marbishu, and it was in a very remote area of the Kurdistan Mountains. All right, and how? All right, those were Assyrians. Dr. Lamsa is a native Assyrian, and the reason that it was so remote is that after the start of Christianity, when all of the controversies and everything started taking place, the Assyrians went to the mountains, and it remained uncivilized. Totally, they did until 1908, I believe, and so what that did, and why it makes Dr. Lamsa so unique, is that the village where he lived, they spoke the Aramaic language that was native, and they enjoyed the culture and traditions just like that of Jesus. And the Roman Empire, I mean, essentially it was at that time part of the Roman Empire, but they didn't really care about the people in the mountains. So anyway, that is how he learned, because he grew up with the culture and the traditions, speaking the Aramaic language, and that is what makes his translation and all of the work that publications that go with it so unique. And just as a word to the wise, in today's world, the Aramaic language of Jesus has caught on big time, and you're starting to see all kinds of people coming out with, well, we studied Aramaic and it's this and it's that and everything. But beware, Dr. Lamsa is the only one that translated, and actually is the only one that could translate correctly the um, the Aramaic text from Aramaic directly into English. So even though he used the King James Bible as a format, uh, the actual translation came from scripts that were found in the Kurdistan Mountains where he was, and and they are original. All right, and so Dr. Errico met Dr. Lamsa in 1965. Not a coincidence. Dr. Errico had learned about Aramaic from someone in his church that knew Dr. Lamsa, and once he learned of Dr. Lamsa's work, he he got a hold of all of them, and then he wrote Dr. Lamsa. Dr. Lamsa was thrilled that there was someone to carry on the work, and so Dr. Rocco Errico has carried on this work for probably 65 years now or more. And what he has expanded upon the teachings and added a whole lot about the culture, and the culture, the language itself. So that's where we're coming from here at the Aramaic Bible Institute. And I have up here Reverend Martin and Penny, and this will remain. Martin is now in spirit, but he is our spiritual advisor, so he remains here. But we studied with Dr. Erico in Atlanta for 13 years, and then we left from Atlanta, and we started teaching the Bible, and we've been doing that Monday night Bible study for about 6 years now. So, and I learn all the time, and even if it's something that we've looked at before, there's always something new. There's just always something new that pops up, and so and what has happened with us is that once you get to the heart of these teachings, especially the teachings of Jesus, it really makes a difference in your life. So, okay. And one other thing here, we're not here to convince you. We're not here to coerce you. And we're certainly not here to convert you. All right. And we are not here to condemn you, your religion, or your beliefs. But understand, you may hear things that are different from what perhaps you were brought up on, or what maybe your religion is now. But we don't teach faith, and we're not trying to change you. And it is all in learning, and whatever I can't think of the right word. Whatever reverberates with you, you take away whatever whatever you can. Okay. So now we are on part 6, the story of David. And so we always this is the story so far. And David, we learned last week that David is on the run from King Saul. King Saul wants to kill David. He is very jealous because he knows that David is going to be in line for the throne. He's the king, and he wants his sons to be king and whatnot. So David has to be on the run from Saul because Saul's trying to kill him. Now, and what we learned last week, okay, David is still fighting the Philistines on behalf of Israel, but he has only a small segment of soldiers and whatnot because the king has shut him off from the rest. And what that means is, remember, we learned that the troops back then were supported by their families, and maybe there was some support from the kingdom, but basically, if you were cut off from the kingdom and David was on the run, and his family didn't really know where he was because he had to keep moving, and so they had no provisions. Okay. Now, and last week we also learned that David and his men were hungry. David went to the priest and asked him for help. They had no food and whatnot, and they did remember they finally, David and the priest finally agreed that David could have the bread from the tabernacle um, that was old, because the new bread is replenished each day. Okay, and the priest gave him bread for him and his men. And I mean, in spite of the fact that technically no one was ever to touch that bread. Okay, so we have to remember that okay. And then we've learned about Jonathan, although Jonathan is King Saul's son. Jonathan and David, Jonathan was very taken with David after David defeated Goliath. They became good friends, and Jonathan was going to support David forever. That's the way it worked. So Jonathan, even though David's hiding out, Jonathan continues to warn David that where his father is coming after him, and all of that. And so with regards to King Saul, okay, he is very angry. He is just going after David, very, very, very hard. Okay. All right. So last week, like I say, the last thing we broke off was he got the bread and the priest also gave him the sword from Goliath. Okay. So this week, George, do you want to help me read scripture?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Then Saul said to his servants who stood about him, "Hear now, you Benjamites, will the son of Jesse give every one of you fields and vineyards, and make you all commanders of thousands and captains of hundreds? And have all of you conspired against me, so that there is none to tell me about the covenant of my son with the son of Jesse? And is there none that disclosed to me that my son has made a league with the son of Jesse? And is there none of you, who is sorry for me, or discloses to me that my son has stirred up my servants against me to lie in wait at this day?" Then answered Doeg the Edomite, who was set over the servants of Saul, and said, "I saw David when he came to know, to Ahimelech, the son of Etub, the priest, and he inquired of God for him, and gave him weapons and provisions, and gave him the sword of Goliath, the Philistine."
Okay. So this is King Saul. Now, what is happening is the King Saul's soldiers and whatnot are starting to pull away from him. They're starting to be more for David, and because remember that also started back. King Saul got angry when the women started praising David when he came back. So he's very jealous. He's very angry, and now he is totally angry at the priest who provided um, David with the bread. And so he is very angry. And so here is what happens.
And
And I'm going to go ahead and take these.
Okay.
And the king said to Doeg, "Turn and fall upon the priests." And Doeg fell upon the priest and slew on that day 85 persons who wore the linen ephod, which were the priests. So King Saul is really starting to go crazy. Now, David. Now we're talking about David. David is speaking once again here. But one of the sons of Ahimelech, the son of Atu, named Abiathar, escaped and fled after David. And Abiathar told David that Saul had slain the priests of God. And David said to Abiathar, and pay attention to this because this is part of the character. I knew that day when Doeg the Edomite was there that he would surely tell Saul, I myself am guilty for the death of all the persons of your father's house. Remember this, and we'll talk about, okay, abide with me, fear not, for he that seeks my life seeks your life also. But with me you shall be protected. Okay, why? Why would he be protected? Because David has called upon God, and it's interesting because David isn't the king yet, but David is communicating with God. He is allowing God to guide him. Okay? So, all right, now. Okay, George.
Then they told David, saying, behold, the Philistines are fighting against Keilah and are robbing the threshing floors. And David inquired of the Lord, saying, shall I go and smite these Philistines? And the Lord said to him, go and smite the Philistines and save Keilah. And David's men said to him, we are afraid here in Judea. And how much more then if we go to Keilah against the armies of the Philistines? Then David inquired of the Lord again. And the Lord answered him and said, arise, go down to Keilah, for I will deliver the Philistines into your hand. So David and his men went to Keilah and fought with the Philistines and brought away their cattle and smote them with a great slaughter. So David saved the inhabitants of Keilah.
Okay. And notice he's always inquiring of the Lord, asking for guidance. Now, and Saul, okay, after he defeated the men at Keilah, okay, then of course Saul learned that that's where David was. And so Saul came to get David once again. Okay. But remember, the Lord said, yeah, go to Keilah, it's okay. So, and of course, he already did defeat the Philistines, and Saul went on one side of the mountain, and David and his men on the other side of the mountain. And David made haste to flee from Saul, for Saul and his men surrounded David and his men to take them. So it wasn't looking real good for David, okay? But there came a messenger to Saul saying, make haste and come, for the Philistines have invaded the land. Wherefore Saul returned from pursuing David and went against the Philistines. Therefore they called that land the division of Sinar. Okay, and I just have this little coincidence that the messenger came to Saul and said, and told him to come and go to the Philistines. Coincidence? I don't think so. Okay, now. All right, now go ahead, George.
Then Saul took 3,000 chosen men out of all of Israel and went to seek David and his men upon the mountains of the wild goats. And he came to the sheepfolds of the way where there was a cave. And Saul went into the cave and lay down there. And David and his men were staying on the slope of the cave. And the men of David said to him, behold, this is the day of which the Lord said to you, behold, I will deliver your enemy into your hands, that you may do to him, and you shall seem good in your sight. Then David arose and cut off the skirt of Saul's robe stealthily.
Okay, so but you get the picture here. They're both kind of in the same location, but Saul evidently was sleeping or whatever. So, and when it says he cut off the skirt of Saul's robe, it just means if he does that, it means that he's going to kill him. Okay, and evidently, Saul would notice that. However, here we go. But afterward, David regretted that he had cut off the skirt of Saul's robe. And David said to the men who were with him, "The Lord forbid that I should do this thing to my master, the Lord's anointed, to stretch forth my hand against him, because he is the anointed of the Lord." So David restrained the men who were with him with these words and did not permit them to rise against Saul. And Saul rose up out of the cave and went on his way. So this is the first time David spares the life of the king. And in spite of the fact, like his servant said, well, the Lord said that there would come a day and you could do this, but David did not kill him. Okay. Moreover, turn back and see that even the skirt of your robe is in my hand. Okay, he's talking he's talking to King Saul now. Because when I cut off the skirt of your robe, I did not kill you. Now you should know and see that there is neither evil nor fault in my hand, and I have not sinned against you. Yet you hunt me to take my life. May the Lord judge between me and you, and the Lord avenge me of you. But my hand shall not be against you. Okay, and I put this Matthew. We'll talk about it at the end. The 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 teachings of Jesus, yes, the Gospels, the New Testament, but they come into play back here in the New Testament, and we're always looking for examples of eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. But I say to you that you should not resist evil, but whoever strikes you on your right cheek, turn to him the other also. And David, of course, represents this, and there's some others too. All right, now, okay, and when David had finished speaking these words to Saul, Saul said to him, "Is this your voice, my son David?" And Saul lifted up his voice and wept. And he said to David, "You are more righteous than I, for you have rewarded me with good, whereas I have rewarded you with evil. And you have showed me this day how you have dealt well with me, in that the Lord had delivered me into your hands, and you did not kill me." All right, so it sounds like things are getting better between King Saul and David, right? Not quite. Okay, go ahead.
For when a man finds his enemy and lets him go free, the Lord will reward him with good. Wherefore the Lord reward you with good for what you have done to me this day. And now, behold, I know well that you shall surely be king, and that the kingdom of Israel shall be established in your hand. Swear now, therefore, to me by the Lord that you will not cut off my descendants after me, and that you will not destroy my name out of my father's house. So David swore to Saul, and Saul went to his home, but David and the men who were with him went up to Mizpah.
Okay, so this also sounds like, okay, they're good. However, Go ahead, George.
Okay. So David and Abishai came to the people by night, and behold, Saul lay asleep in the path, with his spear lying on the ground by his bedside, and Abner and the people lay around about him. Then said Abishai to David, your God has delivered your enemy into your hands this day. Now therefore let me smite him just once with this spear, which is on the ground, and I will not smite him the second time. But David said to Abishai, destroy him not, for who can stretch forth his hand against the Lord's anointed and be guiltless?
Okay, so once again, his servants were itching to get King Saul, and David said, no. Okay, go ahead, George.
David said furthermore, as the Lord lives, the Lord shall smite him, or the day of his death shall come, or he will be smitten in battle and perish. The Lord forbid that I should stretch forth my hand against the Lord's anointed. But now take the spear that is by his bedside and the jug of water, and let us go. So David took the spear and the jug of water from Saul's bedside, and they went away. And no man saw it nor knew it, neither all awaked, for they were asleep, because a deep sleep from the Lord had fallen upon them.
Okay, now notice these stories are okay. Saul, King Saul, okay, was asleep by his bedside, and all of his servants or troops or whatever were around him, and they they were seemingly supposed to be protecting their king, and they didn't. But notice it says though that where they were all asleep because a deep sleep from the Lord had fallen upon them, and essentially, um, the Lord played a role here. Okay, that's what we're saying, as He does sometimes, even even now to us. And David just said, look up there that okay, David, King Saul will die at some point. Okay, but not by me. And his death might come, in battle, or God might smite him or whatever. But David was not going to kill him. So this story continues. I put the whole story here because I just thought it was interesting and important. So um, then David went over to the other side from Saul and stood on the top of a hill afar off, a great space between them. And David called to the king and to Abner, the son of Ner, saying, will you not answer, Abner? Then Abner answered and said, who are you that calls to me? And David said to Abner, are you not a valiant man? And who is like you in all Israel? Why then have you not guarded your lord the king? For there came in one of the people today to destroy your lord the king. This thing that you have done is not good. As the Lord lives, you are worthy to die, because you have not guarded your master, the Lord's anointed. And now see where the king's spear is, and the jug of water that was at his bedside. And David on the other side of the mountain, I'm sure held them up and said, here's where they are. Okay. Well, I'll just go ahead. Then David went over to the other side from Saul. Oops, wait a minute. Sorry about that. And Saul heard David's voice and said to him, is this your voice, my son David? And David said, it is my voice, my Lord, O king. Then David said, why does my Lord pursue after his servant? For what have I done? Or what evil is in my hands? Now, therefore, let my Lord the king hear the words of his servant. If the Lord has stirred you up against me, let us make an offering. But if it be of men, cursed be they before the Lord, for they have driven me out, that I should have no shelter in the inheritance of the Lord, saying, go serve other gods. Now, therefore, let not my blood fall to the earth far off from the face of the Lord. For the king of Israel has come out to seek a flea as one who pursues a partridge in the mountain. That's typical, figure of speech, metaphoric figure, figure of speech. Okay. All right, go ahead, George.
Then Saul said to David, I have sinned. Return my son David, for I will no more do you harm, because my life was precious in your eyes this day. Behold, I have played the fool and have erred exceedingly. And David answered and said, behold, the king's spear. Let one of the young men come over and take it. The Lord renders to every man his righteousness and his faithfulness. For the Lord delivered you into my hands today. But I would not stretch forth my hand against the Lord's anointed. And behold, as your life was highly esteemed this day in my sight, so my life shall be highly esteemed in the sight of the Lord. Then Saul said to David, blessed be you, my son. You have surely done great things, and also you have surely prevailed. So David went on his way, and Saul also returned to his house.
Okay, so this is the second time that David saved Saul's life. And seemingly this time, everything is okay between the two of them. And Saul has recognized, saying, I have played the fool, and said, I have sinned. And so they are okay. Now, all right. So for the scriptures, that's where we're going to leave off for this week. But my this just comes to me all the time. But David is a great example at this point of teachings of Jesus. So if we go to the Matthew 5:3-5, these are the Beatitudes, okay? And I just remember back there when David said, I myself am guilty for the death of all the persons of your father's house. Because David is the one that talked the priest into giving him the bread and the provisions. And Saul found out about it and killed all the priests. And so blessed are the humble, for theirs is,
Penny,
yes.
did David say that he was guilty because he didn't kill Abner? Because
No,
Abner
he
was
said,
the one.
he said, I'm guilty. You have to go back one more thing.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah,
And
that
Abner was the king's man or something, and
yeah,
Abner
that
was.
technically didn't protect him, right? No, he's not saying that that he was guilty. He said that Abner, somebody should have killed him because he didn't protect the king, but he didn't. Abner did not get killed. Okay, but David
Yeah,
just accused him and said, you know, you're supposed to be protecting, the king, and you didn't. But no, the guilt here is because he talked the priest into giving him the bread, and then that made King Saul angry, and King Saul killed all the priests, not just the priest that gave him, but all of the priests, King Saul. And so David just felt responsible. And I mean, technically he wasn't, but he felt responsible. He was humble. And so blessed are the humble. And when they talk about when we study Jesus in the Gospels, and they talk about, okay, in this instance, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Well, what is the kingdom of heaven? All right. Well, and once again, we're going to go back to a word in Aramaic, malkutha. Okay, that does mean kingdom, what we think of, as a place, but it means counsel or guidance. And so David was very humble, period. And so here, when it says, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven, well, David was constantly, remember we just read tonight, he inquired of the Lord. He was guided by the Lord. And so basically the kingdom of heaven, and I wish they had made it clear in the Gospels, just, in the written thing, but the kingdom of heaven, and living in the kingdom of heaven, so to speak, means living by the counsel or guidance of God or spirit, because I know that, some people use spirit. And so David was humble. There's no question about it. And I put it, meek, because David could have won the King Saul thing, okay, just by killing him. I mean, he had every opportunity. But when you talk about meekness in the Bible, that's basically what we're talking about, is settling a confrontation without violence. And so to me, okay, again, that we have a little demonstration there. And of course, 11, blessed are you when men reproach you and persecute you and speak against you every kind of evil falsely. And of course, this is, for my sake, but it's for David. David was being persecuted technically by King Saul, and this, of course, that's for my sake, and that was Jesus. But it was for the sake of the country, which, remember, the country and the religion were the same thing. So anyway, and of course, Matthew 5:38 through 39. I had it a little bit before. You have heard it is said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say to you that you should not resist evil, but whoever strikes you on your right cheek, turn to him the other also. Well, once again, David had the opportunity to do an eye for an eye, well, and kill, but he didn't. And so, anyway, that's just kind of a little combination lesson here. And remember that Jesus taught from the Torah, and while he didn't specifically single out David as being humble and all of that, but when you look at the New Testament, and when you apply the New Testament to the Old Testament, it doesn't make sense to most people, because the New Testament, wow, that's it. And many people don't even read the Old Testament. But anyway, I think these fit very nicely. And I think that's all I have. Yes. Thank you ever so much for your contributions.